Well, welcome everyone. This is Tim McDonald coming to you with another episode of Advocacy at Work. And today I am very honored to be joined by Scott Johnson. How you doing, Scott?
I'm doing great, Tim. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, really appreciate you taking time to do this with me. But before we get in too far, why don't you just tell people, I know a mutual friend of ours connected us, so we got to thank Tom for that. But just wanted to kind of have you introduce yourself and a little bit about like what brought you into the world of advocacy.
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that. So, as Tim mentioned, my name is Scott Johnson, and I live with type 1 diabetes. And type 1 diabetes, it's an autoimmune disorder, and for reasons that the miracle of modern medicine hasn't been able to figure out yet, my own immune system attacked the cells in my pancreas that make insulin. And for me, this happened at the age of 5, but it can actually happen to people at any age. So, um, type 1 diabetes used to be called juvenile diabetes, but as understanding has grown, we learn that people even as adults become diagnosed with diabetes. And so, lived most of my life with type 1 diabetes, and as I entered my young adult years, I started kind of wrestling with the emotional side of living with a chronic health condition and couldn't really find the resources that I needed to help me through that, and decided to start telling my story via a blog. And at that time, the tools like WordPress and Blogger were just hitting the scene, and I kind of got lucky in that regard. But I found it just very cathartic to share what was happening in my head and my heart and with my diabetes. And soon after began to connect with others who were also sharing their stories. And that led to everything that I'm doing today, including my professional career and all the things that I do on the side. So in a nutshell, that's kind of my story.
Well, I just love the fact I'm finding a trend here that most of the people I'm interviewing all have found advocacy as a therapeutic way to kind of help them cope mentally with what's happening to their bodies, So it's kind
Yeah.
of interesting to hear that. And I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but my dad was actually diabetic
Okay.
in an adult age and
Yeah.
actually passed away at right before his 55th birthday from a diabetic coma. He lived alone, and they think that he just went into a little state of disorientation and wasn't able to give himself insulin in time, before he passed away. So that's what they attributed his death to at that young age. So this is something pretty personal to me as well.
Yeah. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
Oh, no problem. I just wanted to make the tie in there because whenever I think we can associate, personal connections, it always makes it a little bit deeper of a connection. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
but before we get too far into it, how would you define advocacy?
That's a pretty big question, Tim. And I think that it's easy to, I think, jump to what might be an initial definition for many, and consider that, legislative advocacy. But I think when living with health conditions, it often also means advocating for yourself with your healthcare professionals. It also means advocating for yourself with friends and family and those around you, as well as the general public. So I think I'm learning as I get older and as I spend more time with really smart people in the field to broaden my definition of advocacy to really just um, advocating for yourself in whatever scenario you're in, and for whatever your needs are at that time.
No, I like that. I don't think I've ever heard one person give the same definition twice. So
Right.
it's like you said, it seems like a very simple question, but it's pretty deep and can go in a lot of different directions. So,
Yeah.
and I know I got the Capitol building in back of me and my background, and Just one of my passions is legislative advocacy, but I also get into, creating awareness and, research advocacy as well. So, and in my book, from patient to advocate, I always talk about like the fact that there's four buckets, and I just named the
Yeah.
three, and the fourth one is fundraising advocacy, but I don't really have a passion for that or a drive for it. So I kind of touch my toes in it every once in a while, but I don't really pursue it too often. So, and I do think it all starts and begins with like what you just mentioned, advocating for yourself is kind of the first step into doing it for others. I think, you need to do, it's kind of like how they tell you on an airplane, you need to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can help others. And I know that this through my, community emergency response team training, CERT, as most people know it, that they described in my class how you look at the X's on the building, and they all got symbols and numbers in them, and they all talk about like what each one means. And I won't go into detail on it. One, because my memory's not as good, and two, because it can get a little bit sad for some people, but it does tell you if it's safe to go in there, and search is one of those. And the reason for that is because you're responding to somebody. If you take yourself out, you're not able to help anybody else. So sometimes you need to make those tough decisions that you need to let somebody go in order to be able to help the masses. And I think that's the same true with us. We need to take care of ourselves before we can start helping others.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I also think you touched on something really important too, and that's identifying your passions or identifying things that don't fill your bucket up. And I think it's as advocates in the space, it's important for us to acknowledge and recognize that we can't do all of it, and that's okay, because there are all types of advocates out in the world, and there are some who are really passionate about, in your example, fundraising, and they might not be passionate at all about legislative work or healthcare advocacy. So it's okay to not do it all, and that's a hard lesson, I think, that takes a lot of time to learn.
Yes, no, I'm glad you brought that up, and I do write about that as well. Just the fact that it can take a mental toll on you, even if you're doing something you're passionate about. So you need to make sure you're taking care of yourself, even if that means permanently withdrawing from advocacy, because you are the most important person. So, but as we look at, I know you said you started with like, Blogger and WordPress back in the early days, and you were bringing back memories for me too. But you went from that, and and obviously you were diagnosed when you were very young. I'm sure you didn't start those things when you were 5, but probably in your teens, I'm guessing. But when you got to that point, like, and started sharing those stories, how has your kind of role in advocacy evolved over the years? If you could just kind of walk us through those initial days of blogging and connecting with people and what it's turned into.
Sure. Yeah, that's another great question. And it initially started with just connecting with other people walking similar walks, and that was profoundly impactful, because for me it brought a big sense of normalcy. So in type 1 diabetes, there are important things that we have to do throughout the day. So for example, one of them is to estimate how many grams of carbohydrates we're consuming, and then match that with the appropriate amount of insulin. And insulin is a scarily powerful hormone that if you take a little bit too much or a little bit too little, you start to have negative effects. And it's surprisingly difficult to count carbohydrates accurately, right? And when I started my journey in sharing my story, that was maybe one piece where I felt a little bit broken, or I wasn't, I felt like I wasn't doing it right, or that how could I, after so many years, still struggle with this simple aspect of living with diabetes, only to find that among with many other challenges we face are actually really normal parts of living with diabetes. Like almost everybody who lives with diabetes struggles, at least from time to time, with those types of things. So it brought a real sense of normalcy for me. It also really helped me see many different perspectives at solutions for problems that many of us face. So it started just connecting with other sort of peers and colleagues living with diabetes. But over time, um, industry and professional organizations and nonprofit organizations started to kind of tune in to some of these things that we were talking about, and then invite us to come together at like a blogger summit or a social media summit, something like that, where we had a chance to actually sit at the table with some of these organizations who are either creating devices or therapeutics, or maybe advocating in whatever their nonprofit advocates in, and they invited us to share our perspectives with them, which then just continued to lead to more and more opportunities to do similar things. Also leading to, in many ways, professional career opportunities. So it's that old cliche saying, it's not necessarily what you know, it's who you know. And um, I found that to be very true so far in my professional life. And so through some of the social media activities, I was able to make some big career decisions that I'm living to this day and enjoying, and I'm very thankful for. Um, and it's in many ways, though, it's a bit of a hard trade-off. In I find myself devoting so much of my time and energy to my professional careers that I don't have as much time and energy to do the kind of freelance and social media work that I used to do. And um, I I maybe justify that a little bit in my mind by thinking that through my impacts at an organization, I'm able to maybe scale my impact a little bit to a greater number of people, even if that individual connection isn't quite as rich or as strong as it was maybe on a one-to-one or a one-to-few basis.
No, I so appreciate that so much. I was just with another advocate at a conference here in Tampa last weekend, and she actually now works for one of the nonprofit organizations, and we were talking just in general about the industry as a whole and advocacy. And she made a statement about, it's different being a member of the church than it is being the church.
Right. Yeah,
And I think,
absolutely.
that's a good way to frame it and let people like kind of see it in a lens that a lot of people might relate to. It's like
Sure.
you go to church, but like being the church is something different than being a member of the church. So,
That's right. Yeah,
but I really love this. And I just want to ask you, I'm guessing, but I don't want to assume anything.
sure.
When you started out on this journey, you were not planning on getting a job in this field, were
Yeah,
you?
I had no idea. In fact, you know, um, I kind of stumbled into this journey in, again, struggling personally with my life with type 1 diabetes, and experimenting and exploring different ways to kind of cope with that, both with the medical side of things, but also just I needed people like me that I could talk with and communicate with. And um, we hear stories out there in the world about maybe professional athletes or these people who are doing incredible things with their chronic illness. And that's important. But I also needed people like me who are just struggling to maybe take their small kids out for a walk or mow the grass without interruption or whatever it might be. And so there was this, this kind of surprising element of finding these everyday heroes that I needed in my life. But I do also want to make sure that I acknowledge, I think even when I came in with blogging, I was very much standing on the shoulders of giants that had come before me that I just wasn't aware of, right? People have been communicating to each other for many, many years. And maybe before blogging, it was email newsletters. And maybe before that, it was bulletin boards on internet connections and things like that. So I I very much want to make sure that I acknowledge that I'm not doing, I never was doing anything new. I kind of found my lane and enjoyed my time there.
It's so funny you bring this up. I think you're my fourth guest in a row now who has mentioned like finding their niche, and usually it's a void that they're personally like trying to find themselves. They don't see it. And so instead
Yeah,
of wishing somebody were to build it, they just build it themselves.
yeah,
And I think that's so important is we're like, if you're listening to this, just understand that, you do not have to wait for somebody to come along and build what you want. You have the power and the passion to make it happen yourself. It doesn't have to
yeah.
turn into something huge. It can just be something small. Because I'm interested to see if you agree with this. I always say, if I could just impact one person, it makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And even to hear you describe it as building something, I didn't even see it as building something at that point. And in fact, I still don't. It's just finding low friction ways to tell my story and to share how I was feeling. There was, one element of doing that in a public manner to connect with other people. But there was also another very powerful element in it for me that would have happened even if I did it in just a private journal or something similar. And that's simply taking some of these very raw and unformed thoughts and feelings and assigning words and phrases to it. That was a very, very beneficial exercise for me because I would be wrestling with these things and I wasn't quite sure how to articulate it. I maybe didn't even have the language to, but in order to write on a blog, for example, I had to go through that process of thinking through that. And that was incredibly helpful for me.
Yeah, I keep getting back to the fact that I think for so many of us, I think, whatever form of advocacy we take is just it's a part of therapy for us,
Yeah.
I know it was for me personally, and I'm hearing that from a lot of other people too. It's just like, doing this, and I know from the blogging I do and the writing I do, it's like I'm already writing another book now, and it was one I kind of started way back before the pandemic, and I got diagnosed. But like, just
Mhm.
it really, after getting this first book out, I'm like, okay, now I got another idea that's been sitting with me for over a decade. I want to get it out, and so I'm
Yeah.
doing something a little bit different with it. But it's like going to be fun, and I'm like, as I'm going through it, I'm taking my time on this one. I'm not rushing through it like I did the other one. It's just like it's really just making me like understand a lot more about myself and life in general as I go through this and put these words down. It's like,
Yeah.
like you said, you just get them out of your head, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's what I was thinking, and here's why it made sense, and here's what I can do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really I, I I struggle to see this too, but it's really selfish of us to keep those thoughts and feelings to ourselves. There's someone out there in the world who needs to hear what you have to say, or what I have to say, or listeners what you have to say, and we're doing the world a disservice when we don't find a way to get that out.
No, that is so, so true. Um, so one other question I have for you, and this might be a multi-part one based
Sure.
upon what stage you were at in your advocacy journey here. But, I always like to ask like how people measure the impact of their advocacy. And I know that might be different today than it was when you first started, but if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit of what your thoughts are on that and
Yeah.
how you do it, if you do.
I kind of chuckle thinking through that question because I I don't feel like I really do. I never was one to like look at my website statistics and measure, okay, is it growing? Is it not? What can I do different? And um, in some ways, I regret not doing that because I think I could have maybe had a slightly different path. But on in other ways, I don't regret it at all because um, it really was for me. And if I could hear from people either reading it or making comments, or maybe I would bump into them at some event somewhere, and I know that something I said reached them, that was really enough for me. Um, I I wanted to make sure that I didn't burn myself out by also, setting up an unrealistic cadence writing or blogging just in order to keep up a certain amount of traffic, to then keep up a certain amount of metrics or what have you. So um, I feel like I really kind of just lucked out in not doing any of that, although I think I could have done better. And I look at some of my peers and colleagues who have grown and grown and grown, and they worked very hard at it. But I think we're all on individual walks. I also think, well, and this is probably mostly due to my ignorance about it all, but it's hard to measure impact on social media. Um, there's a lot of metrics that can make us feel good and feed our egos, and it's always nice to see those things, but I don't know how much weight to put into those things either.
Yeah, I think I'm brought back to when I got my liver transplant 3 years ago, and I was in the transplant uh, wing. I wanted to say ring. Transplant wing. During my recovery, and I remember they were specifically so impressive about telling you you cannot work for 6 months. And
Mhm.
here I am on my cell phone. I mean, this is obviously I'm feeling good. I'm off most of the connective
Sure.
tubes and everything, but I was finally on my cell phone, and I took a call from somebody who was pursuing a liver transplant to another colorectal cancer patient, and
Yeah.
the nurse came in, and she just saw the smile on my face as I was talking to this guy. Um, Happy to report he's actually got one about a year ago and is doing
Mm.
well.
Yeah.
But I was just talking to him for like a half an hour. The nurse waited the whole time. She saw my conversation. She listened to it. I didn't mind, I mean, we were
Yeah.
talking because I was referring him to my transplant surgeon too, and answering his questions and everything. And I hung up the phone, and I just told her, I said, and see, you guys tell me I shouldn't be doing work. I said, look at this and look at how I'm feeling right now compared to how I was feeling earlier. I
Yeah.
said, this is like actually the best medicine I can have is helping another patient,
Yeah.
and
That's
I don't
so
think there's any
strong.
price or measurement we can put on that.
Right. Yeah. It's something that, I feel like I have gotten so much benefit and help and health through my connections in advocacy and social media that it's really this beautiful sort of self-feeding circle that I want to then give back and help people as much as I've been helped. And so yeah, that story resonates with me, Tim.
Well, that's great. That's great. So let's just have a little bit of fun now and get away from diseases and
Sure.
advocacy and just get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah.
So I got just about four questions for you. Just they're not deep or anything like. Well, not most of them are deep. At least the first ones aren't. But you maybe think the last one might be a little bit deep. But what is your favorite color?
Uh, I think my favorite color would be blue. And I think I'm latching on to that's my wife's favorite color, and so we share a favorite color, which makes your memorial behind you stand out to me in a good way.
Yes, and that's the color for colorectal cancer. So that is definitely one of my favorite colors as well.
Yeah.
Um, what is your favorite band or musician?
Ooh, so I grew up on 90s hip hop, believe it or not. And so we're talking like Common, The Roots, Outkast, but there's an artist right now who goes by Jid, Jid, and he's one of my favorites right now.
All right. Now it is one of the things I love about asking this question is I always get to like learn about somebody new and then go check them out and listen to them. So
Yeah, I
I
love
will
that.
definitely do that. And what is one place that you've always wanted to visit but haven't yet?
Um, I don't know if it's exactly a place, but I've always wanted to take a nice, casual, relaxed train ride with my wife. So I'm in the San Diego area and maybe a train up the coast to the Bay Area or even a train ride just across the country, just something where we can relax, spend time together, take in the scenery. And I don't know, when you're with people you love, it doesn't matter much where you are. It's more about being with them, right?
So true. So true. And I love the train ride thing. My wife and I have talked about that too, but we're thinking we want to do it up in Canada or through the Rocky Mountains or
Ooh,
something like that,
yeah, that's even better. I love that.
So, and the last question here is, what is one thing that most people do not know about you?
Um, Yeah, that's a good question. In my younger days, I owned and operated an Ecuadorian rose shop. It was only special roses from a grower in Ecuador that I managed to connect with. It was a short-lived career because being a businessman, being your own boss, that's a lot of work involved. So, but it's a fun fact that I think not many people know.
Well, that is interesting indeed. Yes. And just before we wrap up here, if I were to ask you, what is one big thing, if resources were no issue to you, that you'd like to see happen in your advocacy space?
I mean, there's so many great medicines and devices in the diabetes world that are proven to make a difference, yet so many people can't access them because they're priced out of reach or there are other things in their way. And I want everyone in diabetes to have access to these great medicines and these great devices. It's by no means a cure, like that would be the ultimate, which there's progress happening there. But in the meantime, people can live really, really healthy, full lives with diabetes if they have access to the devices, the medications, the education. So that's what I would wish for.
Perfect. And, how can people, learn more about you and your work or organizations that you would suggest anybody, impacted by diabetes can get in touch with for support and help?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to take that question in reverse order because
Okay.
my career right now, I'm really blessed to be working at an incredible nonprofit organization called Blue Circle Health, and that's at bluecirclehealth.org. It's a nonprofit organization that was established to help adults living with type 1 diabetes. And it's offers free care, education, and support to adults with type 1 diabetes. We're available in 20 states and continuing to grow. So keep an eye on that. Even if we're not where you are yet, keep an eye on it. And then for me personally, I still have my blog. It's at scottsdiabetes.com. It's been a while since I've published anything new, but it's my blog. I can do what I want with it, and I have no intentions of taking it down. So that's a great place to kind of start, and then from there you can find all the different social media channels and things like that.
That is fantastic. And I'm sure you're probably like me and don't give yourself enough credit. I'm sure there's plenty of valuable information, even if you haven't contributed to that for quite a few while. So,
Thank you.
well, Scott, thank you so much for joining us on Advocacy at Work. And if you have not checked us out yet, please visit advocacyatwork.com, subscribe, and you will get all the updates whenever I publish a blog post or another podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you, Tim.